Hello, welcome back to yet another beautiful day. And as culture demands it here at the One Tree Podcast, it's the day we bring you insights from people like you and me so that we can inspire me and you, and hopefully we can get the circle going. How was your week? Did you keep your promises ama wewe ndo uliambiwa maandishi haya si mageni jijini, labda kwa mgeni jijini, ila kwa wenyeji wa jiji ni maandishi tuliyoyazoea. Basi popote ulipo unakaribishwa. I am your host, Wasmo, the poet, and this is the One Chip Podcast. In this episode and episodes to come, we'll be speaking about the few lessons you've picked up, and these lessons will help us gain a more insightful approach to how we handle some things in our lives. And in this particular episode, we'll be looking at when we have the villains without even knowing it. And I believe, and there is a conviction in all of us that paints this perfect picture of who we are. I don't think there's any particular person who sits, dreams, and even thinks that they could somehow be the bad guy. We all have fitted ourselves into the narrative that we are so good. Even when we're having our flaws, we think of ourselves as so good. On some occasions, though, we do things and with no intentions, we end up playing the villains. And in this episode, looking at these scenarios where this has happened and welcome aboard. An example will be when imagine you're leading a project at work and then you're so focused on delivering results and meeting deadlines, but in the process, you're coming off as too demanding. And after some time, one of your co-workers finally tells you that they feel undervalued and exhausted. To be truthful yourself, there was no intention on your part to make anyone feel this way. But the pressure of work blinded you to their perspective. So there's some situations we sit down and we so focus on what we want, on how we want to run things, that we get blinded on looking for outside opinions, or even different ways of how we could handle that particular case. It's safe to say that we have the best intentions at heart and we had no pleasure of even hurting anyone. These situations show that even with good intentions, we can impact negatively without realizing it. Recognizing this helps us remember to pause and check in with others. In some cases, we let ignorance lead the way, and that lack of awareness ends up hurting other people. An example would be, imagine you are at a family gathering and the relatives are sharing a story of a recent loss. You feel uncomfortable, so you try to lighten the mood with a joke. Ukamuka kwa DJ. So after some time, you realize that joke made them feel dismissed. And in this case, it's a case where you didn't know how to handle your emotions, and to escape them, you ended up making things worse. Our ignorance, especially in emotionally charged situations, can lead to hurtful actions, even and especially when we mean well. And this takes us back to a place where learning to admit when we don't know how to handle something, rather than brushing it off, helps us prevent an intentional harm. And there's another case in our life where it deserves reflection and growth, and probably it's only with growth that we can understand the difference. Like, for a personal example, there's a time in my life where I had a very good relationship, and I think it reached a time where things were not going very well. And in the spirit of bossing each other up, we decided to assemble the best weaponry we could find against the very few pieces of us that we saw together. So we picked up the weakest point of each other and sort of like decided to bring them down. So we did so much damage to each other that we stopped talking at that particular time. So after a whole year, I think it was around Christmas. So after like a whole year, I was sitting there and I was thinking, Perhaps if I had experienced this growth at this very moment, or probably perhaps if they had learned to relay their emotions in a better way, and probably if that version of them and this version of me could have sat down together, I think we couldn't have reached that space where we decided to trash each other so much that it was so bad that it was something that couldn't be corrected. So like I think it's time with time I gained the perspective that wasn't very possible before. And sometimes the villain in the story is simply the person who had not grown up enough to see things from a bigger perspective. And it is this honesty that probably set me free and found closure in it. And it's more of like hoping that wherever they were, they could see this as I'm seeing it now and probably to let them go in peace. It's more of like a case where there was no one among us who knew better. So we resulted into the very thing we knew back then. Another important thing to consider is to humanize the very experiences that we do experience in our day-to-day life. It's more of like looking at the experience where we could offer grace and where we could receive and where we could hope even to receive in the same measure. Like if you've been around me, I tend to give these stories a lot of times that we do grow impressions on waiting for people, but once we realize that at some particular points we're the ones being waited on, we could learn to give us some grace that we could expect from people when we're being waited on. So it's more of like putting yourself in people's shoes and understanding the experiences before reacting. It's the same case of like think of a friend who often cancels plans the last time. It's so easy to get frustrated and think they're very unreliable. But then if you happen to learn that they're dealing with a lot of anxiety and sometimes feel overwhelmed, you may take a different approach. So it's a call to us to put ourselves into people's shoes before showing our emotions and before we villainizing them. Because through this, we begin to understand that everyone has struggles, often unseen, sometimes actions that seem selfish or careless or driven by personal battles. And when we humanize others, it's easier to be forgiving and patient. And in turn, we are more likely to show ourselves that same grace. And I think it's in a hope that probably whatever we give to the universe, it could get back us on. It's more of like sowing and reaping. So you reap where you sow. And a worthy reminder will be that life isn't a story with clear heroes and villains. It's messy and everyone has moments when they act in ways they later regret. And the true growth lies in recognizing these passes, these scenarios, and learning from them and aspiring to do better. And it is in my hope that these will give you a reflection of wanting to do better, wanting to learning and recognizing the very spaces you've acted in ways that you've later regretted. Thank you for listening in. Catch us every Sunday here at the One Tree Podcast.